Okay, let's do something a little bit different. Wanted to test out this old Megger that I picked up and make sure she's still working. I used this before. I've troubleshot motors and things with it before, and it worked fine. It's an old Navy Megger, got it on surplus. So you may be asking, what is a Megger? A Megger measures resistance. So you use it on motors. You can use it on other things too, but to test the insulation inside the motor or on wires. You can meg wires as well. The problem, you have a resistance measurement on a meter like this as well. Put it on ohms and it'll read. It says up to, oops, sorry about the camera there, bumped it. You know, see it's reading mega ohms right now. If I bring the leads together, nothing. There, it's out of the range in the mega ohms. So why can't you just use a meter like this to measure the resistance inside of a 480 volt motor to see if there's moisture in it or if the windings have gone bad? Well, because this meter just uses 9 volts. So when you're measuring the resistance, you're only trying to force 9 volts through the insulation. And maybe the insulation is still good enough for that, but when you put 480 volt 3-phase to the motor, then it can leak across and cause a fault or a short. So what you have is Meggers, and Meggers get a lot more complicated than the one I'm about to show you. They can be digital, battery powered, and go up a lot higher voltage. But this one works really good, and it's a great starting point. And when I was just starting out, I wanted to get a Megger of my own. And so I picked this one up, and it has always worked for me. It's always told me what I needed to know. So anything built in the military is very sturdy, it seems. So we have these latches. Pick that up, and it came without leads. I had to add these leads myself. There's a look at the meter. Right now it's sitting on infinity. It goes all the way down to 0 ohms, which would be a dead short. You can see U.S. property. Certificate of calibration. Last calibrated in 1969. So that doesn't bother me any, because usually with these, I'm looking either to be up in this range or down here. Those are going to be the answers I want. I'm not looking if it's 5 or 10 or 15 mega ohms. I'm looking, hopefully, when I measure it, I'm looking to be up in here, meaning that the insulation's good, nothing's shorted. If it's anywhere down in here, that means that the resistance is too low for a 480 volt motor. So let's get the leads hooked up. Just some simple screw terminals go on there. And I put alligator clips on. So now, like I said, some Meggers can be battery powered. A lot of Meggers have hand cranks. So this particular Megger, separate the leads. All you do is you hand crank it. And that will generate the voltage. I'm going to show you that in a minute. Let's see if I can tilt this up so that you will be able to see the gauge better and still allow me to crank. You can see where the needle is. Okay, so what I'm going to do is crank it without the leads together. And you're going to see that the needle will stay put because there's no continuity, infinite resistance in between those. Now, if it's still working, when I take these two alligator clips and I put them together, and you can see the needle moved a little bit, there should be zero resistance between there. When I start cranking this over, you should see this needle drop all the way to zero. And there it is. Let me zoom out a little bit so you can see what I'm doing with the crank here. So now, how many volts does this actually produce? Why is this better than a 9-volt meter? All right, let's take a look at that. So what I'm going to do, set the fluke up to read voltage. And we're going to put these leads right to the leads of the meter. Just like that. Make sure, let's get these wires up out of my way so I can crank. Now we should see the voltage this is putting out. If I remember right, this is right around 400 volts. Let's see. There it is, it's DC. So about 350 volts DC. It's reading negative because I had the leads wrong. So when I'm cranking this, this is putting 350 DC volts across and then measuring how much current leaks through and given that as a mega ohm reading. Right now it's reading around 11 mega ohms through that meter. So, yeah, I don't even have to turn it as fast as I was turning it to get good voltage. Now, is 350, 380 volts, is that enough? Well, it's a heck of a lot better than 9 volts. And in general, what I've found is that this old crank Megger will give me a good indication whether the conductor's bad or whether the motor insulation is beginning to break down. It does give me a good read. At work, I do have a battery-powered Megger that goes up to 1,000 volts. If you really want to give it the best shot, or if you're dealing with a higher class of insulation, then yeah, you probably should go up to 1 kilo ohm or 1 kilovolt. But in general, this thing gives me a very good idea. These hand crank Meggers, they never run out of battery. They're stone cold reliable and just built like a tank. So it has worked for me and continues to work. I've had it for years and years. And like I said, I don't calibrate it. I'm looking for more of a good reading or a bad reading, one of the two. If it's in between, If I'm measuring a 480 volt motor and everything is connected upright and it's in between here, then I'm calling the motor bad. It needs to be up in the 150 to infinity range for me to be good. If it's anything but that, then either I will get a higher voltage meter, Megger, or I will just replace the motor. Sometimes, if a three-phase motor, especially if it's an open motor, not a totally enclosed, if they're sitting on a shelf for a long period of time, they can get moisture inside of them. So then what happens, you hook up the motor, you wire it all up, and you shoot 480 three-phase into a moisture-filled motor. You can take a guess what that can do. So it's always good to check your motor. If it's a new motor, and especially if it's an open and been sitting around for a long time, just throw a Megger on it. It only takes a second. Go to one of the taps and to the ground of the motor. If you go between the terminals of the motor, you should get no megaohms because you're reading right through the coil of the motor. But if you go to the ground, to the casing of the motor, it should be infinity. If it's anything else, now sometimes you can heat that motor up. You could warm it and drive the moisture out of it. But I don't recommend, if it's anything other than way up here, I don't recommend shooting power to it. Either you're going to have to, you could try warming it up, and that's how hot you get it is going to depend on the insulation class of your motor. But every motor you should be able to hold your hand on there and at least count to 5, 10 without having to take your hand off. If that motor is running at those kinds of temperatures, then that's pretty normal for most motors. So you could warm that motor up. If it's small enough, you could put it in an oven for at 120 degrees or something and drive that moisture out of there. If you do that and the megaohms change and it goes up, then you know you probably just have a moisture issue. Dry that motor out until the Megger reads good, and then you can feel free to power it up. So I just thought maybe you'd like to see this old bit of history right here. This thing's still working. Calibrated last in 1969, and it's still working for the purpose that I want. I'm not using it to measure actual resistance. I'm just looking to tell me if there's moisture or a short to ground in a motor. And it does that really good. And let's be honest, this is cool. Beyond all else, this bit of military hardware is just the neatest thing. And I like to use it just because of that. All right, well, thanks for watching. Throw a thumbs up my way if you like this thing too, and we'll catch you next time.